Dear ladies and gentlemen, guests and invitees, and everyone following us on the portal jutarnji.hr, good morning and welcome to the conference Regional Partnership for Accelerated Energy Transition, organized by the representation of the European Commission in the Republic of Croatia, European Investment Bank, and media partners Hansa Media and Delo. Facing the current global geopolitical challenges and turmoil, European Union wants to achieve as soon as possible a greater level of reliable supply of energy through the document called REPowerEU, a group of strategic goals, recommendations, and proposed measures focused on the accelerated termination of the use of Russian energy products, especially natural gas, which encompasses also very specific announcement of regulatory changes, but also incentives for further integration of national energy markets and systems. The strategy will contribute also to the further progress of Union towards the forming of a common energy policy, and the first step on this path will be the strengthening of regional cooperation among member states, which in this way considerably will be able to easier, faster, and cheaper in achieving a greater degree of resilience from possible disruptions that could be a consequence of the interruption of energy flows from Russia. It is precisely Croatia and Slovenia that represent an excellent example of such regional cooperation. In order to stimulate public discussion on the challenges that for our two states is presented by the most serious energy crisis faced by Europe in the last 50 years, and the possibilities provided by REPowerEU strategy through panel discussions and individual presentations, we are going to hear today from the representatives of state institutions of the two countries, as well as by the institutions of the European Union, heads of leading energy companies, representatives of the scientific community, as well as of international financial institutions. And after the conference, there will also be an opportunity for informal socializing with a reception. That's why we are very happy to be able to welcome our high dignitaries and guests who have joined us and recognize the importance of this topic. We expect the arrival of Nataša Tramišak, Ministry of Regional Development and EU funds, and we have with us Davor Filipović, Minister of Economy and Sustainable Development. Tereza Cervinska, Vice President of the European Investment Bank. Ognjen Zlatev, Head of the Representation of European Commission and Croatia. Anton Kovačev, Head of Office of the European Investment Bank in Zagreb. Stojan Petrić, Director of the media company Delo. State secretaries, representatives of the diplomatic corps accredited in the Republic of Croatia, presidents of the management board, distinguished businessmen and experts, academic community, sponsors, and of course representatives of the media. At the very beginning, I would kindly ask member of the management board of Hansa Media, Madam Ana Hanžeković-Krznarić, to welcome all of us. Good morning to you all. Dear ministers, we are missing one minister, but dear Minister of Economy, dear representatives of the European Investment Bank and the European Commission, dear guests from Slovenia, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great pleasure for me to be able to welcome you in another conference which is organized together with Hansa Media, European Investment Bank, and the European Commission, with the significant partner support by the Slovenia company Delo. The cooperation of two media companies and institutions on such a major issue is a step forward in all areas. With the entry of Croatia into the Schengen and introduction of euro, it is clear why the connections between Slovenia and Croatia will be strengthened as partners in the great transition on energy which is ahead of us. Energy is the main topic in all of the world. REPower conference is focused on the topic of energy as a response to the crisis caused by the Russian aggression of Ukraine. And it has shown that the questions of energy security and energy affordability are closely related. The importance of energy is best visible through the energy strategy of the European Union expressed in the legislative package Fit for 55. And the REPower conference, I'm sure, will additionally raise the level of ambitions in order to be able to avoid certain problems, work or do more and better with quite much better cooperation between EU institutions, member states, and supranational institutions and investors. I hope that today we are going to reach some solid conclusions which will stimulate the development of energy and resolution of problems that our countries are facing. And to all of you, I wish you to enjoy the content and the speakers that we have prepared for you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Kažeković-Krznarić. And on behalf of media partner Delo, we are going to hear from the director of the media company Delo, Mr. Stojan Petrić.
On behalf of the media outlet Delo, I would like to welcome all the representatives, especially the minister and the colleague, Madam Adam Hažeković, who is a member of the board. Dear ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to put in front of you this project because we will tackle one of the most important issues. The new geopolitical reality
od nas zahtijevaju da potaknemo
we have to increase the energy independence of Europe. That's why we would like to welcome the representatives of European Commission. The plan will contribute to the progress of the European Union in the formation of our joint energy policy. The first steps in this regard will be also strengthening of regional collaboration between member states. Slovenia and Croatia are waiting for this kind of collaboration. I would also like to heighten our collaboration in energy distribution. I would like to say that the economy wishes to stabilize the energy resources. But also we want to have competitive prices. The companies need to approach the energy supply in a strategic way. A high increase in energy products also results in reduction of competitiveness and can also jeopardize the sustainability of companies. Energy policy has to provide sufficiently affordable and environmentally friendly energy supply. For successful green transition, we need to have energy connection. That is why it will be very interesting to listen to all participants of our panels. And I wish you a successful conference. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Petrić, and we will also be welcomed by the head of European Investment Bank Office, Mr. Anton Kovačev. The floor is yours.
Poštovane gospođe.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the European Investment Bank, I would like to thank everyone for participating in this conference on REPowerEU, Regional Partnership for Accelerated Energy Transition. I would especially like to thank our main speakers, Madam Teresa Červinska, Vice President of the European Investment Bank, Madam Kadri Simpson, who is going to connect through a video link, EU Commissioner for Energy, then our Minister of Economy and Sustainable Development, Mr. Davor Filipović, for joining us despite their numerous obligations and for finding the time to participate. My gratitude also goes to all of our speakers who are going to shed some light on the possibilities of resolutions for the energy crisis through the response of the European Commission contained in the program REPowerEU. I would also like to thank Mr. Ognjen Zlatev, head of the representation of European Commission in Croatia, Madam Ana Hažeković-Krznarić, member of the management board of Hansa Media, and Mr. Goran Ugrlić, editor-in-chief of Jutarnji list, for the excellent cooperation and co-organization of this conference. The challenges that we are currently facing require from all of us a fast and decisive response. The misfortune that has struck the people in Ukraine has consequences for the European but the entire global economy as well. The increase in the prices of energy will have a strong impact on the overall European economy. This is very clear. Therefore, the acceleration of the transition to green economy is one of the main drivers of the climate plan of the EIB for the period from 2021 to 2025, with the objective of supporting green investments in the amount of €1 billion by 2030. The EIB group will provide a key contribution to the REPowerEU program by strengthening energy security, by increasing the resilience of the energy system of the European Union, and reducing the dependence of Europe on fossil fuels. Furthermore, the EIB group has a decisive role in the implementation of ambitious objectives of the European Union in achieving climate neutrality by 2050. In that sense, the European Investment Bank, as the largest multilateral lender in the world, is one of the key levers in achieving a healthy and strong economic recovery with an emphasis on green projects. I hope that this conference is going to contribute to greater investments into renewables, whether the investments are of Croatian or foreign investors or of mixed companies. To all of the investors, I would like to send the message that EIB is your reliable partner for the implementation of sustainable investments into energy projects, but also all other investments in the economy and infrastructure. So, the times are quite difficult, but we can be both proud and content that Croatia is full of water, wind, and the sun, so it has major possibilities in using the renewable energy sources, and I do hope that we are going to know how to use it, and I'm sure this conference is going to contribute to that. Finally, I wish you all a successful conference, and I hope that the conclusions and the discussions will be useful for the future of the Croatian economy and Croatia in general. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Kovačev. And now we are going to hear from the third host of today's conference, head of the representation of the European Commission in Croatia, Mr. Ognjen Zlatev. The floor is yours.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, dear Minister Filipović, dear Vice Presidents of Madam Červinska, dear Mr. Kovačev, dear Mr. Petrić, dear friends from Hansa Media, Madam Hažeković-Krznarić, dear Goran, distinguished invitees. A couple of months ago, when we were considering the topic of this conference, REPowerEU was a natural decision, and the only decision, because this is the most pressing topic today, energy topic. For a long time, the climate changes have been pushing us to reduce fossil fuels and start using renewables, which we now see in a new legislative package, Fit for 55. But the activities have been changed because of war atrocities. Today, we live in a new and dangerous world. Russia has turned energy into arms, and European consumers and taxpayers are financing war against Ukraine. This has to be put to a stop. In our fight against climate change, we've activated contingency measures to put an end to our dependence on Russian fossil fuels. Our response is called REPowerEU. This initiative is based on 3 pillars. First, on energy savings, diversification of energy supplies, and accelerated rollout of renewables as a substitute for fossil fuels. This conference will discuss the potentials that our countries could better leverage. We will discuss our better collaboration and the projects that could bring very efficient solution when it comes to energy supply between Croatia and Slovenia. Croatia, for instance, has a huge potential for additional investments in geothermal and solar thermal energy and wind energy. But despite the excellent climate, although it is a bit too hot for me in this part of the world, but the share of total solar energy is just 1% in the total energy generation in Croatia. Electrification of heating and cooling system would increase energy independence. It would also tap into decarbonization and allow much more affordable energy prices to consumers. Croatia would no longer be dependent on natural gas imports. And in order to improve energy efficiency, the security of supply should require also a simpler permitting process for renewables. It is important to support the development of energy communities and to increase investments in renewables in small enterprises and households. By investing in generation of green energy, we also have to improve the energy infrastructure and storage capacities. Croatia should increase its energy savings, especially through renovation measures and sanation and remediation measures for post-earthquake period. Also, we need to tackle the energy efficiency of the building sector for most vulnerable citizens. We need to encourage the use of public transport and its further greening. We have to invest in intelligent transport systems. We have to put up hydrogen filling stations, and we need to encourage the use of zero-emission vehicles. These are just some of the examples that show ambitious energy targets at the level of Croatia and at the level of the European Union. Without any doubt, we need to consider how to achieve these targets. REPowerEU includes also Recovery and Resilience Facility that encourages energy investments, but also coordinating financing of cross-border infrastructure. Many reforms and investments that I've already enumerated are included in the Croatian National Recovery and Resilience Plans, and Croatia has just received its disbursement, €700 million, 7 days ago. EU member states have to add a special REPowerEU chapter in their recovery and resilience plans. Currently, we are negotiating with all EU member states, including Croatia and Slovenia. The European Commission has, within the REPowerEU package, also proposed a review of the Recovery and Resilience Facility regulation, which is to be discussed under the European Parliament. And the funds foreseen would be dispersed in the form of grants, and we also have another €225 million in the form of loans. €100 billion under Cohesion Fund for decarbonization projects will also allow another €27 billion from Cohesion Funds and €7.5 billion under CAP. As we've just heard from Mr. Kovachev, we will also see the share of European Investment Bank. We have significant funds at our disposal. The challenge is how to use them smartly. And for the very end, I will just reflect on an important aspect of REPowerEU package. Probably we won't tackle it too much today, but it is important for energy savings. These are small things that all of us could start doing today. And the aggregate effect of these small things will be significant. In our household, we should reduce our heatings and coolings. We should switch off the lights when we don't need it. We should start using public transportation, walk, or use our bicycles. And if we have to drive our cars, we should reduce our speeds. We can see that in this way, we could reduce use of or consumption of gas and oil by 5%. Winter is coming. It's a famous sentence from Game of Thrones. And now we are faced with this fact. And that's why together at the European, national, local, and personal level, we have to collaborate to achieve REPowerEU targets and ensure secure, affordable supply of energy in Europe. And I am sure that everything that we are going to discuss today will contribute to this target. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you, Mr. Zlatev. And after these introductory speeches, we will hear from our special guest, Teresa Czerwinska, who I invite to address us. The floor is yours.
Good morning, dear ministers, Minister Filipovic, Minister Tramišak, distinguished guests of the conference. Dobre dan, and welcome to this conference. It's my pleasure to be here today and to participate in this long-awaited, very important event in the country, which we have very good, fruitful cooperation, and country has greatly capitalized on the European Union funds and capital of the development banks. Ladies and gentlemen, as you know, the recent years have not been easy for the European Union, and we only managed to recover from the pandemic crisis as we were confronted with a new one, even more dramatic shock, which is the war in Ukraine. The more time passes since the invasion of Ukraine by Russians, so the more we realize the enormous toll the war has taken over the European landscape. It has been first and foremost a human tragedy, causing immense suffering, but geopolitical consequences have been felt on many other fronts, including the migration crisis, energy crisis, supply chain disruptions, triggering a global cost of living crisis and affecting people worldwide. Energy sector is a point in case. European economies are struggling to wean themselves off Russian fuels. Scarcity of alternative energy sources has made the energy price soaring, with some countries experiencing even 50% increases in their energy bills and raising fears that rationing may be introduced later this year. We need to quickly find alternatives to Russian fuels. It's essential that our action is ambitious and comprehensive, such that no place or person are left behind. The REPowerEU plan meets all these criteria. Repowering the EU will require coordinated investment in energy systems, and the European Commission estimates that more than 200 billion euros are needed between now and 2027 to phase out Russian fossil fuels import. This is in addition to more than 400 billion euros per year needed during this decade to meet the Fit 55 objective. And the clock is ticking. So without doubt, to meet the scale of the proposed investment program will require a joint coordinated effort. As the EU Climate Bank We will do all we can to support REPowerEU ambitions. Accelerating the transition through green finance is one of the main drivers of the EIB Group Climate Bank Roadmap. With its goal to support up to 1 trillion euros in green investments by 2030, the EIB Group can make a crucial contribution to REPowerEU, strengthening energy security, increasing the resilience of EU energy system, and making Europe less dependent on fossil fuels. The EIB is one of the most significant lenders for energy infrastructure, and last year alone we provided 13 billion euros to financing to the energy sector, of which almost 5 billion euros to energy efficiency projects and 5.7 billion euros to renewable energy projects, from which almost 4 billion euros to electricity grids. Over the last 5 years, of a total of 62 billion euros investment in the energy sector, more than 90% went into renewables, electricity grids, and energy efficiency investment. And you know that EIB Group supports the entire range of renewable energy technologies, including wind, solar, hydropower, biomass, and geothermal, as well as their integration in the energy system through smart grids, digitalization, as their integration, and to the end of the storage projects. The EIB has been instrumental in the deployment of key renewable energy technologies, such as onshore and offshore wind farms, where it has been a cornerstone investor in the last couple of years. In addition to that, our support to solar photovoltaic has increased significantly in the past 5 years, with about 1 billion annually. But renewables and smart energy distribution will not be enough, and we know it. We need more invest in the energy efficiency, and we need more invest in higher risk projects. And this conference exactly addresses those two challenges. First, energy efficiency. It is something particularly important to reduce fossil fuels dependence, with the advantage of relatively short project preparation and implementation time. And the EIB's know-how and experience in this area allow to maximize the impact across a spectrum of clients. Particularly, I'm thinking here about small and medium enterprises, who usually are very much affected by crises like high inflation and liquidity needs and access to the capital. We are ready to further capitalize on our fruitful cooperation with the European Commission in this respect, whereby we'll help to develop a model to support member states with designing their energy efficiency financial instruments and to increase the uptake of these schemes under the cohesion policy funds. And last but not least, to reach the EU's ambitious REPower objectives, it will be crucial to boost higher risk private sector investments in innovation and new climate technologies. The EIB is committed to unlock Europe's innovation potential to build production capacity for the purpose of large-scale competitive commercialization. Especially so that, as our engineers estimate, that about 50% of the emission reductions needed by 2050 depend on technologies that are currently still at the prototype stage or demonstration stage, and they are not yet available in the market. These technologies will not come just out on thin air. We need to promote them and make sure that they have the funds necessary for becoming competitive. Since 2000, we have invested more than 200 billion euros in projects in innovation, R&D, skills, training, and digital networks. We are ready to accelerate those efforts, and under REPowerEU, I think it is a great occasion to do it. Risk-sharing instruments like InvestEU have been designed as a backbone to provide support to particularly ambitious projects in breakthrough technologies, which private banks may not consider to be attractive. Public institutions like European Investment Bank must be ready to provide an extra push for exceptional technologies in a structured and responsible way. And InvestEU has been designed to do precisely that. Ladies and gentlemen, the war in Ukraine has exposed how energy security and climate mitigation are intertwined. And it is now evident that green transition is not only about climate, not only about our planet tomorrow, but it has also a chance to be a source of strategic autonomy and energy independence for today. Let me stop here and encourage you to have good production discussion today. And at the end, I would like to reassure you that EIB Group is ready to closely work with Croatia, with Croatian banks, entrepreneurs, to make it happen, green, responsible transition to the benefit of our citizens. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Hvala gospođi Červinska.
Thank you, Madam Červinska. Unfortunately, we were unable to be joined by the European Energy Commissioner today, Mrs. Kadri Simpson, but she has prepared a video statement for today's conference, so let's have a look.
Hello, everybody. Greetings from Brussels. Russia's aggression in Ukraine is pushing up the price of energy, food, and commodities. It is the most obvious impact our citizens feel in their pockets at the end of each month, and it has a direct impact on our businesses. The Commission is exploring ways to put a stop to rising energy prices. That includes looking into the feasibility of introducing temporary price caps and analyzing alternative market designs. However, solving energy prices alone will not help us address the bigger question, our energy independence. Europe's energy landscape has changed fundamentally since Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and we need to urgently reduce our dependence on Russian fossil fuels by fast-forwarding the clean energy transition. Our response is the REPowerEU, our plan to remove Russian influence on our energy system by diversifying sources, accelerating renewables, and boosting energy savings. Of course, European Green Deal is still in the core of our policy actions. We simply need to go further and faster. Let me start with diversification. Russia continues to threaten the EU with more cuts to gas supplies. Our supply remains stable for the moment, but this could change. So we have been working to step up our preparedness and contingency planning for the immediate future. For this, a major milestone is on the way, a winter preparedness action plan to be presented in July. It will feature recommendations on greater coordination at EU level, as well as demand reduction. Meanwhile, Member States are working hard to refill gas storage by the winter. We can't rely on business as usual. So first, we have set up the EU Energy Platform to help us diversify. The platform will aggregate EU gas demand, allow us to better and more efficiently use gas infrastructure like LNG terminals, and carry out our outreach to supply partners. We are also working to set up a joint venture mechanism that will help us purchase gas directly and redirect it in a competitive way among interested member states. As part of the platform, we have already established the first regional task force for Southeastern Europe to help Bulgaria and its neighboring countries. And they should be an example to follow. We want to see other regional platforms. Croatia and Slovenia will be part of a second regional group of the EU Energy Platform, the Central and Eastern Europe Regional Task Force. Second, we have also closely cooperated with the member states to see if there are any additional needs for alternative gas and oil infrastructure. Europe's gas network is more resilient than ever. To be able to import sufficient gas from other suppliers, across the EU, limited investments of 10 billion in infrastructure are needed. Think of the Rogatec gas interconnector between Croatia and Slovenia. Upgrading this, and quickly, has even more importance in the current context. Accelerating the work on the remaining open issues should be a priority. Similarly, there is a new need for expanding the Krk LNG terminal capacity and reinforcing the related gas infrastructure to also provide additional supply to Slovenia and Hungary. The importance of these investments have been identified in the REPowerEU plan, but to get them from the drawing board to reality, member states need to work together to confirm the market demands for the additional volumes and to quickly implement the projects. For oil, parts of Europe depend heavily on the Druzhba pipeline. The REPowerEU has identified very targeted investments should this supply stop. For example, an expansion of the capacity of the Adria oil pipeline to ensure viable alternatives to Hungary and Slovakia. Regional cooperation should go beyond emergency solutions. We have seen good examples of common electricity projects, like the Green Switch smart grids, involving Croatia, Slovenia and Austria. This is the kind of cooperation we will need for expanding renewables in the region. Speaking of which, REPowerEU proposes increasing the renewable target from existing 32% to 45%. There is huge opportunity for Croatia here, alone and jointly with Slovenia in the Adriatic Sea basin. At the same time, these two countries have huge solar rooftop potential. Right now, the percentages are tiny, but with the right set of incentives, solar energy could become a cornerstone of your electricity system. Also, your region could become one of the strongest promoters of renewable hydrogen production. This means even more deployment of renewable electricity for hydrogen production, but the possibility is there. Lastly, a word on energy savings. We need twofold approach here: behavioral saving measures and investing in energy efficiency. Building renovation, the supply of energy efficient housing, in particular social housing, and the replacement of gas and oil boilers with heat pumps will all boost efficiency. There are numerous European funds available to support this. With the EIB, we have also developed a model for an energy efficiency financial instrument for inspiration. It can combine loans and grants under cohesion policy framework. Thus, the means are there, and I hope countries make the most of it. Ladies and gentlemen, we are not where we expected to be this time a year ago. But if we plan now, prepare and work together, we do not need to worry where we will be a year from now. Croatia and the countries in your region have immense potential to decarbonize. I can only hope that you grasp it and lean into it even further. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Madam Simpson. And I'm especially glad that today we have with us Madam Natasha Tramišak, Minister of Regional Development, who I invite to address us.
Hvala vam.
Thank you, dear ladies and gentlemen, dear Madam Hanžeković-Krznarić, dear colleague Filipović, dear Head of Office of the European Investment Bank, Mr. Kovachev, dear Madam Červinska, dear Mr. Zlatev, dear all of you who are present here, dear media, it is a great pleasure for me to be present today at this important conference and this important topic of the energy transition and transformation of our economies, of our societies at large. REPowerEU is an important platform which has been established over the last few months on the European Commission level, and we have also heard from the previous addresses how and in what direction it is supposed to act on the territory of member states. Republic of Croatia, of course, as a part of the European Union, is one of the member states that keeps up with all of the efforts and trends in changing also its habits, its business operations, and primarily of economic transition, but also including the complete transition of the public sector. My message today comes from the point of view of the Ministry of Regional Development, of EU funds, especially in the setting of the new multi-annual financial framework. 2 years ago, when we completed negotiations within the EU on the new package for the 7-year period and on the new sources of financing, especially referring to cohesion policy, already at that time there was this ambitious plan in the direction of both smart and digital. And of course this plan was followed by the Republic of Croatia. However, aware of the new geopolitical circumstances and new situations which are happening when it comes to the energy products on the global level, were supposed to or resulted in additional strengthening of all of these efforts and focusing more on green, digital and smart. The Republic of Croatia has all of the predispositions when speaking of geopolitical position, morphological or geomorphological characteristics to turn these challenges into its opportunities. When speaking of that in the context of the sources of funding, many sources have been mentioned, from the National Recovery and Resilience Plan and also instruments of the EIB and now of the multi-annual financial framework. What is already known is that in our partnership agreement for the period by 2027, over 30% of funding from the EU Regional Development Fund has been placed at the disposal precisely for greener Croatia. So this includes the greening of our economy, but also the creation of new sources of energy, including renewables, but also it implies the strengthening of energy transition in the public sector. Over 2.2 billion euro is precisely dedicated to this objective of the cohesion policy. When we add to this our efforts on the regional level, we are talking here about the territorial program and smart sustainable cities and smart sustainable islands. Over 800 million euro is here at the disposal precisely for the transition into greener, cleaner technologies, green infrastructures within cities, more sustainable urban mobility, and everything that, in a way, not just in terms of energy production, but what is going to reduce the dependence on fossil fuels or their use. The Just Transition Fund with the 176 million euro, which will be focused on 2 of our regions, which are significant producers of CO2 emissions, and they should also go through this green transition. We are talking about great monolithic structures in the economy in the Sisak, Moslavina, and Istria counties. Now, when we put together all of the challenges or all the sources that are at our disposal from the new 7-year multi-annual financial framework, we are talking in total about more than 2.5 billion euro. This sum, we believe, will be a strong impetus in the future to also use additionally our own sources and private initiatives to make strong advancements in the energy transition of our economy. I have mentioned all of the predispositions of the Republic of Croatia, but as we can see also through some calls that we use through bilateral agreements, that we've recently also had a call for the Norwegian financial mechanism. Renewables, not only in terms of solar, but also geothermal energy, which represent a strong potential precisely here on Croatian continent, it has turned out that we have numerous prepared projects in that regard, and over 25 million euro have been allocated recently for these additional efforts. All of these major infrastructure strategic projects, I also see here Mr. Barbaric, President of the Management Board of HEP, who also is participating in the preparation of the gas interconnection and will probably place Croatia as one of the leaders in the European Union as an energy-independent country, but also as a leader in clean, renewable energy. Thank you once again. I really do wish you a pleasant discussion and panels on this topic and all of the information that is going to be exchanged at today's conference. Thank you very much. Thank you, Minister Tramišak. And we also have with us the Minister of Economy and Sustainable Development in the Republic of Croatia, Mr. Davor Filipović. Mr. Filipović, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Dear hosts, I would like to welcome you all in the same order as my as predecessors. It is my great pleasure to be with you here in this conference about REPowerEU plan, because I would like to tell you what we as a government are doing in order to ensure uninterrupted and sufficient energy supply to Croatian businesses and Croatian citizens. Energy security is a topic dominating Europe and currently dominating our lives. Brutal Russia's aggression of Ukraine and solidarity that the European continent shares with the Ukrainian people is strongly reflected on the issue of whether Europe is going to have enough energy and how, within a short while, to substitute our demand for gas and oil from Russia. That is why the European Commission has proposed the REPowerEU plan, the aim of which is to make Europe independent of Russian fossil fuels by 2030. At the EU member states, there is active negotiation on the Green Plan so that by 2050 Europe can become climate-neutral economy, for which a general approach has been adopted, and EU member states have also discussed the use of renewable energy. The REPowerEU is an ambitious plan focused on short-term and medium-term measures and accelerated pace of implementation. We need to know what we are doing today. And we also need to know how we are helping our citizens and economy today, and not only contemplate what we should do in the forthcoming period. Such a specific and concrete plan requires more synergy. And that is why, among other things, we are also working on common gas supply and also refilling of gas storages at the EU level, acceleration of renewable projects, and energy savings, as we heard from my predecessors, and also better infrastructure interconnectedness of entire Europe. These acceleration measures also are reflected on the targets for renewables by 2030 in the final conception, which should amount to 45%, and the savings from 9 to 13%. That's why we have additional funds, and also we've initiated technical negotiations about what each EU member state should do in this regard. The REPowerEU plan is especially important for Croatia, but also for our neighbors. Southeastern part of Europe is not connected sufficiently in terms of infrastructure and gas infrastructure, and also in terms of oil, because although there is oil infrastructure, it is not sufficiently used. It is underused. Madam Simpson has also alluded to a few main projects that we've been working on as a government. I will address first Janov. The current Janov capacities, when we speak of oil transport towards Hungary, amount to 11.4 million tons. The capacities of refinery in Hungary are 8.1 tons. So with the current capacities, we could fulfill the Hungarian demand. And also part of oil from Hungary could also go to Slovakia. REPowerEU plan also includes doubling of JANAF capacities, so security of supply, of oil supply, not only in Croatia, but also in our neighboring countries, could be ensured over Croatia. And this is what we are working on, and this is where we would invest a lot of energy in the forthcoming period. The REPowerEU plan also includes our LNG terminal on the island of Kirk, as we've heard also from Madam Commissioner Simpson. What we are doing is that we will double the capacities of LNG terminal on the island of Kirk so that we can ensure not only security of supply in our homeland, but also to be available to our neighbors in Slovenia, and also to increase supply towards Hungary. To make this happen, we also need to speed up investments in gas pipelines, which is what Plinacro is in charge of. And this is what we'll also insist on. I have to say, likewise, that in our plans, when we contemplate the positioning of Croatia as an important factor in this part of Europe, when we refer to new energy map of EU, we're also referring to Bosnia and Herzegovina. So in the midterm period, we will also provide supply to Bosnia and Herzegovina. We also have gas pipeline projects for our interconnection with Bosnia and Herzegovina, but also we have to refer to Trans-Adriatic pipeline. That will be our connection and interconnection with Montenegro. This is all in compliance with the activities of European Commission regarding positioning of Southern Corridor and supply of Azerbaijan according to the plan that we are discussing today, REPowerEU plan. As you've heard from Madam Commissioner, she also referred to gas storages. This is what we are doing in Croatia and also at the EU level. The government of the Republic of Croatia has provided a guarantee to HEP of 400 million euro, and HEP now has this commitment for gas storage, underground gas storage, to ensure further security of gas supply. This will be finalized by the 1st of October in fashion as foreseen by emergency team for gas supply in Croatia. When we discuss the REPowerEU plan, we also have to highlight, as I already mentioned, there are a lot of funds for infrastructure investments, including funds for removal of limitations concerning grid connections. So HOPS, Croatian operator of the transmission system and distribution system, have more than 2.9 billion kunas available for the construction and modernization and digitalization of their grid, so that our system would be even more enhanced in the future. I have to say that the National Recovery and Resilience Plan also includes funds for investments in electricity storage, generation of renewable hydrogen, and development of geothermal energy. There are also funds for the heating system, green mobility, as we heard also from Madam Tramišak, and energy efficiency in industry, amounting to 2 billion kunas. In the same context, we also have to refer to the role of renewable hydrogen in the future, also defined under the REPowerEU plan. The Republic of Croatia, at the end of March this year, adopted the Croatian strategy, Croatian hydrogen strategy by 2050, and is one of the main initiators of hydrogen project, North Adriatic, initiated together with Slovenia and the region of North Italy. We want to interconnect projects in Slovenia and Italy when we are discussing hydrogen and to position well in this context. With the Republic of Slovenia, you all well know, we also have a connection, which is nuclear power plant Krško. We've had very successful collaboration for many years, and we believe this will continue in the future. Everything that I've just addressed indicates that the security of Croatia and the security of Europe is inseparable from energy independence. The security and independence have always been intertwined concepts. And in our times, when we are faced with a lot of challenges and insecurity, but also with huge opportunities for tectonic changes in order to strengthen our national interest, REPowerEU provides us with a foothold for further construction and development of independence. I wish you successful work at this conference. I wish you to have fruitful discussions, and I wish you all the best in your future business endeavors and in our future collaboration. Thank you very much. Thank you, Minister Filipovic, and thank you all speakers. We've come to our first panel discussion entitled Sustainability and Resilience, how to ensure reliable energy supply in Europe. The introductory speech will be given by Mr. Frane Barbaric, President of the Management Board of HEP. The floor is yours.
Good morning to you all. I want to welcome you all. The ministers have left us, but I'm going to welcome Madam Červinska, Mr. Kovačev, and organizers, and Madam Hanžeković and Mr. Petric. Dear panelists, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for the opportunity to address you on behalf of the Croatian power company HEP and to provide you an initial impetus for the discussion in the panel. The topic of the panel, how to provide reliable energy supply in Europe, is in the focus of energy policy of key energy entities. We in HEP know very well what it means to work under difficult circumstances in natural disasters and even during war to provide for energy supply. This experience that we have and that we have used to build our activities in all of the crises, including the current crisis. Nowadays in Europe, as probably never before in the history of European Union, we're talking about joint platforms, cooperation and solidarity. And Croatia, even though it has been that before, lately has become an important energy hub. The recently adopted regulation on gas storage is based on the spirit of solidarity among member states. So the joint action became a main postulate on the level of EU. That's why it's also important to have coordinated efforts of all stakeholders in the energy sector of each individual member states. Thus, HEP, as the key energy company, has taken over the task of providing sufficient quantities of gas for the domestic market in the coming period. The filling of the gas storage is underway, and we are going to provide for the sufficient level according to the government's decision and the National Crisis Team. This will provide a key contribution to the prevention of possible disruptions in gas supply for the next winter. In terms of security of supply for the coming period, those activities are going to be combined with the LNG terminal. Also, as the co-owner of the LNG terminal operator, we are going to get on board the plan of increasing its capacities to 6.1 billion cubic meters. With additional investments into the gas system, we will provide sufficient energy for our own needs, not just for us, but also new quantities of gas for the neighboring countries, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Slovenia, and Hungary. LNG terminal is an excellent example of justified investment co-financed by the European Union through the CEF, the instrument for connecting Europe. It is good to see that Brussels has recognized the potential of increasing the capacity of of the terminal and gas pipeline, which our government nominated when preparing documents for REPowerEU. The terminal is key to increase diversification of supply by making it possible to import larger quantities of liquefied natural gas from different sources. This will reduce the dependency of Croatia and neighboring countries on Russian gas. Also, we already have to think also about its role in the energy transition or the gradual replacement of fossil fuels. This can be achieved by constructing appropriate infrastructure to receive and send off hydrogen as the fuel of the future. As I've mentioned, benefits of this project will be felt by Slovenia as well. This would additionally strengthen the cooperation of the two neighboring and friendly countries, which are member states. The most recognizable symbol of our cooperation is the joint nuclear power plant Krško, which has been for over 40 years a reliable, low-carbon source of electricity for our two systems. The fact is that nuclear power plants can today meet the strictest international standards of nuclear safety, but also represent an efficient way to tackle climate change. That's why after Croatia acceded to the initiative for stronger focus of the EU on nuclear energy as one of the options to provide sufficient capacities, we considered investing into the project of a potential construction of another Krško power plant. We strongly support the project of the Slovenian partners, and we have expressed our interest in its participation. On this occasion, I would like to single out a few examples of a recent cooperation with Slovenian companies co-financed by the EU and in line with the Green Deal. Late last year, we successfully initiated the first phase of Synchrogrid European projects realized by Croatian and Slovenian operators of the transmission and distribution system. The project resulted in improving the quality of the voltage in the energy systems of Slovenia and Croatia, and it also provided for efficient integration of distributed units for energy production from renewable energy sources. In that sense, the project is an efficient response to the increasing share of production from renewables in both states. I can proudly say that the European Commission has evaluated Synchrogrid as the best project in its category. The high evaluation was also given to the project NextE, with which the European Union co-financed infrastructure for the filling of electrical vehicles along the European transport network. The project included 6 cohesion countries, among them Croatia and Slovenia. Both mentioned projects are characterized by investments into 2 important segments of the European energy transition, the energy network and the traffic sector. Of course, the key element of the transition is investment into renewables, which is decisive in a situation where Europe is turning its back to Russian gas, coal and oil. That's why HEP is increasing or accelerating the preparation of power plants based on renewables. As fast as we can realize those renewable projects, that will bring us closer to the objectives of decarbonization of energy, independence of Russian energy, and energy self-sufficiency of the Republic of Croatia. We expect their realization to be facilitated by the implementation of the recommendation of the European Commission on accelerating the issuance of permits for projects in renewables. The biggest single project of HEP currently pertains to hydro energy, which is the upgrade of the hydro system Senj, with the increasing of capacities and investment of 3.5 billion kuna. We are also developing 2 projects of black power plants, which are in the future going to signify an additional possibility of utilization of certain surpluses of energy. Broader use of hydrogen technology is expected after 2030, and our projects will be aligned with the national strategy. Several years ago, HEP in its development projects counted on hydrogen. Thus, for instance, for the new cogeneration block being built in Zagreb and Osijek power plant, we have contracted for turbines which are in the future going to be able to use hydrogen. Hydrogen technology is one of the areas where Croatia is going going to have cross-border cooperation. Thus, for instance, Croatia and Slovenia and the Italian region, Friuli Venezia Giulia, have signed the letter of intent for the establishment of a hydrogen valley in North Adriatic. Hydrogen is one of the priority technologies foreseen for development in the coming period in line with the key European documents, namely the Green Deal, the Fit for 55 package, Recovery and Resilience Facility or Plan, and finally the document REPowerEU. As the areas which, according to those documents, also require significant investments, we can mention the transmission and distribution of electricity. The objective of investment is for grids to be able to accept the production from the increasing number of new renewable sources in the system, and for consumers to take over the role of active buyers. Thus, in our national plan, we provide for the amount of almost 3 billion kuna. About half of it pertains to the modernization and development of an advanced grid, including smart meters. The range of current examples and projects we are talking about today have a common denominator, which I've mentioned at the very beginning, which is cooperation, coordination, and benefit for all those involved. Their final objective is reliable energy supply for the industry and citizens and the construction of a low-carbon society. Croatia, as any other country, has its specificities, development needs, and priorities, as well as its own mix of tools to achieve those objectives. Nevertheless, for the entire EU area, the same principles apply and the same values apply, and this is the path that we need to follow. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Barbaric, for this introduction and the response to the question how we can provide reliable energy supply for Europe and other questions. We are going to hear discussed by Erik von Breska, Director in the Task Force for Recovery and Resilience of the European Commission, Sabina Škrtić, member of the management of the ENA Group, Hrvoje Krhen, Jože Bajuk, member of the management of Petrol, and Darko Markotić, member of the management board of INA. Marko Bijačina will be the moderator, who is the Assistant to Editor-in-Chief for the Economy at Jutarnji List. The floor is yours.
Dobar dan svima.
Good morning, everyone. It is a pleasure to see you all again, I would say, at the same place. We've seen each other before, and I see many familiar faces. I think it was January when we had our traditional energy conference. And at that time, we addressed energy security. Energy security, I would say, at the time, perhaps we were right in diagnosing the key topic in energy sector, not only energy sector, but in society at large. This year, however, we couldn't foresee what would happen in the upcoming months and weeks, and I am sorry that we were right. I would have preferred if we had been wrong with what we discussed in January. There is a saying which says that there are decades when nothing happens, and then there are weeks in which a decade happens. And I think we live in such times. And the question is, the question of security of supply has now been a priority issue because things are happening that in previous years in energy system could not have been foreseen, and even things that until recently were considered that they should be as they are, but now need to be reevaluated. I think that we won't be able to find easy answers, but at least we will try to address some topics, some matters, some future directions. And we will start with Mr. von Breska, because he has to leave us in about half an hour, and we would like to give him an opportunity to address us. And also because all the introductory speeches to me seem as if it was a dance of billions, because we listened respond to the amounts of funds available, but we were not able to hear what we need to hear, which is long-term feasibility of all the projects, because in energy previously we used to discuss this and evaluate this, and this might be normal within this context of crisis. Mr. Pambroska, we had Next Generation EU program, national recovery and resilience plans. What seems to me is that nobody is discussing recovery today because the recovery is already here, but we are discussing resilience, and we know that this 30% of funds were foreseen for green projects, but it seems that the priorities have changed. And this is my question for you. To what extent the Next Generation EU project is compatible with what we had earlier, and whether there is any room for these plans to be reviewed for those member states who will need it, because the circumstances have changed.
Nemamo zvuk, samo sekundu.
Something is happening with the sound. Just a second, please. We are waiting for the audio signal. Can we hear you now? No, we still can't hear you. Unfortunately, we cannot hear you for the time being. Perhaps you're muted. Well, all of us know that teleconferences are always faced with something like this. Well, anyway, while we are waiting for to resolve this technical glitch, Mr. Kirchen, I have to start from you, because as we heard from Mr. Zlatev initially, winter is coming, but maybe LNG is coming would be a better saying. I don't think there is any fragment of energy infrastructure showing better the change happening within a very short while, because from a project we know how difficult it was to implement, and now nobody questions whether it's needed, and we are even discussing its expansion. Nobody questions that. So I don't want to sound irrelevant, but it seems that LNG terminal is the star of this crisis, if we can put it that way. Well, yes. While with the start of operation from our terminal, 1st of January last year until today, we supply 60% of energy supply for our Croatian market. Our terminal has been used for more than 2,700,000,000 of natural gas, and every 2 weeks we also have ship-and-ship operation. Tomorrow we will receive the 35th cargo, and the supply from terminal is continuous and stable, apart from February last year, when 2 cargoes were not able to reach the terminal, but otherwise we have continuous and uninterrupted supply. We work 358 days a year, 24 hours a day, without interruptions, and this is what it's going to be like until the 1st of October, the beginning of new gas year. And for this new gas year, currently we are developing the ship plans, so we don't expect any interruptions or reductions in gas supply over our terminal. We were able to hear from European Commissioner and our ministers this expansion project. Could you tell us briefly what it would look like? We know that the project is in the initial phase, but what would be some timeframes? Well, with the current capacity, we are working at about 80% of the terminal capacity. We offer to the market 2,900,000,000 cubic meters of natural gas a year. For any further increase in capacities or placement or marketing of natural gas from our terminal, the precondition would be expansion of capacity for transport system. The way in which we could increase our capacities fast is by adding another line for regasification. And we could say that this is a natural development, increasing capacities, because of all the avenues we could use in implementation. This is something that we could do within a very short period, let's say 2-year time, of course, with rational investments. And the terminal itself and the transport system should be considered as a technological unit. So I believe that they will be synchronized as they have been with our Plinacro colleagues and will be able to offer such capacities. So when can we expect this? So within 2 years, we would resolve transport infrastructure. We have a pipeline. So what is the capacity that we are discussing? We are discussing a capacity of 700 cubic meters per hour. Okay, so now we have certain framework. Mr. Van Breska, you are here with us on the screen. I hope the technical glitch has been resolved. So the question has been asked. So is now the time, high time, to review what we discussed before because the circumstances have changed?
Next try. I hope you can hear me now.
Yeah. Čujem vas.
Yes, we can hear you.
So thank you, first of all, that I can be with you. Unfortunately, not in Zagreb, but at least from Brussels. Sorry that I cannot stay for the whole panel. You asked a very pertinent question, and I would indeed maybe say few things. The first one is we are very happy so far with the implementation of the National Recovery Plan of Croatia. I think that's important. You probably know that only a few days ago, Croatia was among the first countries who received a disbursement of 700 million euro. So it's the 6th country out of 27, which means that the Croatian recovery plan is well on track. For this, I would also like to thank our colleagues in Zagreb working with us on a daily basis. And indeed, I mean, the recovery facility and the recovery plan were put in place as a response to the COVID crisis. But now, obviously, we are facing a new crisis, but we still think that the recovery plan is a good instrument to address this new energy crisis. Because when you think about it, high energy prices, they affect the competitiveness of our businesses, they raise inequalities, in particular with low and middle income groups. So the impact, in a sense, is very similar as the one which we faced under the COVID crisis. And now we need to make sure that we overcome this problem. And this is the reason why, indeed, we have proposed in the context of REPowerEU, and it has already been mentioned quite a number of times by the previous speakers, to address this problem also through the National Recovery Plan, also of Croatia. And for this purpose, there is a possibility to also mobilize additional funding because Croatia has the right to ask for 3.6 billion euro of loan support, among others, to address these new priorities. And some of them have obviously been mentioned, one of which is obviously the security of supply, and LNG terminals have been mentioned, gas infrastructure has been mentioned, but obviously we would also see additional efforts in terms of energy savings and in terms of rolling out renewables. And I stop here.
Well, just to follow up, the question is logical, in my opinion. We've heard Madam Simpson, and we know what REPowerEU package includes. And we know that there is also a proposal to increase renewable targets from 32 to 45%. And in this context, it was logical that this share of green projects within National Recovery and Resilience plans would increase from 30%, that was until now, to a higher percentage. Digitalization is still important, but maybe at the moment, energy is a higher priority. Is this possible?
I think this is clearly possible. We are already in discussion with the Croatian government and to identify the projects, the additional projects, which would require financing. Indeed, I mean, we also would want to see more, deeper reforms on renewables and on energy efficiency and additional investments. Just to give you one concrete example, which was already mentioned, which is electricity interconnections, transmissions, and networks, which clearly need to be upgraded, which need to be digitalized. We also think that more can be done, for example, to accelerate permits for renewables. I understand that the Croatian authorities are thinking about solar on rooftops in particular, but we also understand that there are other projects which probably are not as clean as the ones I've mentioned before. And here we are still think that some of them are very valuable because these energy projects will increase the security of supply, not only of Croatia, but also of its neighbors. The LNG terminal has been mentioned, the gas pipelines to Slovenia, for example, has been mentioned, and these are indeed projects which we would also be willing to support.
Okay, thank you very much. So the conclusion is still that the funds are there. But what to do with those funds and in which period? It seems to me that the financial value of time is higher than the value of capital. Mr. Markotic, Mr. Barbaric alluded to our history in his introduction, security of supply and the role of HEP, and that's why I would like to follow up and mention INA. Whenever there is energy crisis, it's somehow we've got used to turn our eyes to INA. And now INA is expected to do its share like other energy companies. And our Prime Minister also refers to this. Everyone should bear their share of burden in this crisis. Are you in an awkward position somehow? Because you are expected on the one hand, within a very short while, to ensure secure supply, especially in the context of our domestic project to increase production of oil, generation of oil and gas. But on the other hand, we see this green agenda. And we know that within a certain while, we want to reduce the consumption of such energy products. So what about you? How are you doing this resource allocation? How are you making your decisions? What are you going to invest in? And of course, you need to remain profitable at the same time. First of all, thank you very much for your invitation to participate in this panel. I would like to welcome all the invitees and all those who follow us online. Your question is actually contradictory. However, I would like to respond in the following way. In the introductory part of this conference, we were able to hear what this crisis has resulted in, which disruptions are there when we speak of supply lines and supply chains. And of course, INA, as an important energy company within the European Union, is part of this story and a very important stakeholder for the future. I would like to single out both components of the story, irrespective of our volatile surroundings. And I am sure that this kind of landscape is not a good friend to future investments. But I could also say that our financial performance, last year's performance, provides us with financial stability and position in the market. We are able to continue with our strategic projects. First of all, the project of modernization of Rijeka refinery, which is 4 billion kunas worth. At the moment, it is 50% finalized, but when we complete this project, we will have a much better assortment of products that are missing, not only at the local market, but also at the regional market at the moment. So this project is developing by its own pace, and I believe that it will be finalized successfully. On the other hand, we also refer to gas. This is why I'd like to say that INA is currently working on a major project on our North Adriatic drill wells, and I expect that very soon they will provide a new supply of gas, and annual production will be about 55 million of cubic meters of gas, which is about 7% of total gas generation of INA. We also have some commercial discoveries on the continental part when it comes to gas and oil, so we have to say that we are very active in this segment. However, also in this segment that relates to renewables is important for us. So we have either project pipeline or project pending to be implemented or implemented. We have 2 projects, solar power plants in Sisak and Virje, about 12 megawatts. And we are expecting very soon finalization of these 2 projects. We are actively involved also in other segments of the so-called green agenda. First of all, I'm referring to biogas, green hydrogen, and potentials in geothermal energy and hydrogen. Well, you did refer to good financial situation, and some would say even too good financial situation. We hear this very often in Croatian public, that oil and gas companies in this crisis have an extra profit, and this should be somehow regulated in this crisis. Do you agree with this? What are your results this year? I would say that currently the external landscape is definitely in favor of oil industry. We should not shy away from it. This could be very easily read and interpreted from all financial statements, not only of INA, but also other similar companies. But I have to remind you that 2 years ago, the situation was completely different, not only for us, but also for others in the sector. We just have to remember the pandemic, the price of energy, the demand, and we had a reverse situation. So currently, good and favorable circumstances are important for us to be able to continue with our projects that are vital. But currently, we are more focused on security of supply and provision of sufficient derivatives. Especially now we see that we are in the beginning of a very intensive tourist season. And we also want to provide our support and our share for what's needed in the Croatian and regional market to have secure supply of all derivatives. This is not a topic that we would be discussing a year or a year and a half ago, even during that very intensive crisis regarding fuel. We would even feel stupid to ask a question like this, but now we see the situation has changed. Mr. Bayer, we heard it, and as we could see also, the situation in Slovenia is very similar. Some things have returned, and for those things we believe that they are gone, especially when we are referring to regulation of market prices of all derivatives. In Croatia in 2014 it was lacking, in Slovenia it was a bit different. So how at the moment all these circumstances affect petrol operation, which is important for energy system in Slovenia?
Thank you very much, and greetings from my side as well. Petrol, unlike INA, is just a trader of oil and derivatives and energy products, of course. So perhaps this impact in this completely positive part on the side of the production is quite low, where we purchase and then sell on. And of course, we traditionally cooperate with INA and other suppliers in the region. But at that moment, I think the major impact of regulation is from the side that we are lower in our prices than the neighboring countries. Let's leave aside profit and everything else, but profit is a short-term consequence. This year we are talking about the profit of last year. She's talking about last year's snow, basically, and this year's results will be visible next year. So it means we always have this lag, especially from the very human point of view. Those 2 periods periods do not coincide. So I just wanted to add that. So we have a lower price in Slovenia and Croatia. The situation is very similar in Croatia and Slovenia. And we have considerably increased the sales. And we see currently this as exhausting ourselves in this situation. Just as the colleague from INA has said, I think that it will be increasingly important to be sure, or rather that it will be increasingly important to make sure that there are products to be sold, especially if we take a look at what is happening in the broader surroundings. The sales are higher, the burden on the logistics is at its maximum. I think we are now facing infrastructural challenges in Slovenia, the railway, the building of the second tier, the connections between Croatia, Slovenia, and Austria, the burden on the logistics because of the challenges faced by Austria. So in this situation, we see this more as something that exhausts our potentials. But if we put it in the context of the energy crisis, which is no longer just about the high price of gas as it was last fall, and Ukraine is no longer just a border incident, but rather we have entered a period of full-out war, which is going to last for a longer period. Of course, I think the main challenge is, without talking about profit or margin, that's not my intention, but in general, I think it will be in all our interests to see how we can treat energy companies to make sure they are increasingly efficient and better in this period of energy crisis. So I think the issue of profit is a very short-term issue. Regulation, of course, does it have an impact? It is logical from the point of view of the regulator, of politics, but perhaps just to make a joke, at that moment we feel like we have all dived under, and then we have to see how long we can stay without air. Yes, Madam Škrtić, I think Mr. Bajok has opened up one of the key questions of all of this. And it is that every action has a reaction, and every measure that we adopt nowadays in the short term, and in the sense of providing for affordability, prices, and so on, has certain long-term consequences. But an important and the biggest part of ENA's business operations, in addition to everything else you do, is also the gas sector. So when we're talking about the price regulation, the sectors, and we know that in the gas sector in all of the countries, not just in Croatia, it's in force, how do we find a balance which on one hand will make it possible to prevent this radical impact on the living standard of our citizens, and on the other hand, not to yield the negative effects for the development of the industry, for investments, and everything else that at the end of the day does arise from the market price of the energy products? Well, we have on several occasions in conferences of this type warned precisely of this level of to what extent or what level the citizens, the markets, the household, the businessmen, the industry can go. What is this spread that they can bear and tolerate when it comes to the increase in energy prices? And from the point of view of a gas trader such as our PPD is, we are facing a huge need for huge liquidity. Our profit margin is nothing, no bigger than that in those aspects, but the costs of financing are far greater given this terrible price hike. We also see that the governments of all member states are trying to employ different measures to stabilize or amortize this impact of prices on households and partially on the business sector, because primarily this makes us, Europe or the single market, lose competitiveness, which is the most important thing. And I don't think there's the right answer to that. And as the colleague has said, everyone is racing. We have gone underwater, and now we're trying to see how long we can stay under the surface without air. But what does require some thought is that the idea that we are living in some sort of a false idea that we are in a market environment. Why am I saying this? I'm saying this because the current price of gas and electricity does not reflect the demand and supply and the relationship between demand and supply. If we look at the total amount of electricity being produced all over Europe from renewables and what share was produced 10 years ago, it would be logical that electricity does not have such a high price and not such a price hike. But when we speak of gas, of course, we have tread into a period, especially over the last 10 days, we see this increase in the security given the reducing capacities of the North Flow and so on and everything else that is happening. But the fact is that currently there is gas as a commodity on the market, and this same gas so far still reflects to a sufficient extent some sort of demand. So my question is, and why is its price so high? So the question of speculations is not here for the first time. Last year, if I'm not mistaken, we discussed in a similar composition of panelists, and we talked about the same problem, which had a horrible negative impact on the complete industry of the EU, and this was the conclusion of the calculation period for CO2 emissions, when the CO2 emissions rapidly increased in April last year, because we know, of course, that the people had to meet their needs. And again, this included some speculations. I think the real question, in addition to the standard one that each member state, including the EU at large, should very much make sure to create good plans for strategic security and stability when speaking of energy supply. But I think it's high time for us to deal also with the speculative activities which are incurring a lot of damage, and also reflect, in my humble opinion, a form of some sort of a proxy war and impact on the competitiveness of the entire EU economy. Yes, Mr. Bajuk, is what Madam Škrtić is saying actually some sort of a lesson from all of this? Because we see through the regulation that we already see the allowance for certain exemptions in certain parts. We see the market changing, and we see some general nationalizations of companies being prepared in Germany and so on. In other words, things are changing. And is this direction in which we are going in the long run? And you've also mentioned that Petrol is a different company from INA. You're not vertically integrated in the oil sector, but I would say that you're much more horizontally integrated through other activities and other energy segments. So how does this strategy function under these circumstances where we actually have parallel crises in all markets, not just in oil, but also in gas, in electricity, and all other segments of the energy market? The bad side, negative side, is that when we increase the prices of gas, electricity, or oil derivatives, we're always the first news in the daily news shows. But the good thing is that we are sharing this retail part. So that the good thing is that we think, and we have put this into our strategy, that before this energy crisis developed during the COVID times, we thought it was a short-term thing. There was no war in Ukraine, and Petrol sees a challenge in the fact that the sources of energy are going to be diversified in the future, which means that it's going to be different. I keep repeating in similar conferences that I don't think that electric vehicles are going to win over classical vehicles, or hydrogen run versus some other technology. We are going to have more or several technologies at our disposal. That's how the humanity develops. So we see diversification. We see that petrol is no longer and will never again be a monopolist in the energy sector, but on the other hand, we are getting faster in servicing our clients, our buyers. So that aspect is good. And this also diversifies the risks, because you can cover a broader spectrum of our customers' needs. And through this REPower, whatever REPower says about what we all have to do in order to achieve certain objectives, which means that in the household segment, our response to this is that we offer solar, a heat pump, a charging station for electrical vehicle, battery, and everything else that is going to be made possible by technology in the future. In the B2B segment, we offer to participate with our capital in the company's energy transition, and we see hydrogen as, let's say, a fifth energy product. So we have oil derivatives, LPG, ground gas, and so on. So we see a major opportunity in the flexibility and in covering the needs of our customers. So dispersing the risk, yes, dispersing the risk. And our customers are increasingly demanding. In the 1960s and 1970s, it was enough for us to have fuel oil or bring it to somebody's backyard. You were able to call a truck driver and wait there for their home. But now the customer service is much more complex and much more demanding. So we see an opportunity there for us. We don't see an issue or challenge in it. Mr. Markotic, let's go back for a second to the topic of NPOs. One of the projects within our National Recovery and Resilience Plan, NRRP, is the project of the biorefinery in Sisak. What is the status of this project? Well, in my response, I'm going to follow up also on what colleague Bajuk has said, who has provided an introduction into this response. I would say that we are not yet at the stage of making final investment decisions in this project, primarily because the market circumstances have changed significantly in the sense of prices of steel, construction materials, availability of labor force, and prices of services, which have increased the value of our initial project by more than 50% compared to the initial project. And the second part of our response is what Mr. Bajuk from Petrol has said. What is currently not clear is what direction the market is going in when it comes to bioethanol, biofuels, what's going to happen to the transport system, electromobility, hydrogen, and other energy products. I think that all of this together is putting us in a position where we have to weigh very well whether such a project is currently adequate and appropriate, or if we currently need to put it on hold until we see how things are going to develop further. But in parallel with that, as the colleague has said, we want to do projects which are going to provide for the availability of all sorts of, or all types of products for our users, both in our gas stations and in other places, to make sure they have at their disposal all possible energy products, because we don't think that we're going to transition into a single transport mode. But let's go back to my favorite topic, which is the impact of the regulation or regulatory framework in the long run. So this seems contradictory. In one hand, we are planning to invest major public funds into a biorefinery, but on the other hand, perhaps in the short run, but currently we are repealing the obligation to mix biofuels to protect our customers. I think those two are in collision. Well, it may seem like that, but as I say, when we look at these major projects that we need to consider over a period of 10 or 15 times, then it's very difficult to have a strong confirmation of what a market for the given product is going to look like in the future. I would also like to reflect on something else. I don't think that none of us think that renewable energy will not going to be dominant in a certain period, but currently we hear that the need for energy and even fossil fuel is still here, and we are not going to be able to do the substitution in the energy mix over the short run. But this substitution also has to be done adequately and in the appropriate time frame, because it's not going to be cheap or simple as a process. And in this process, I think we also all need to take part. Here I'm primarily referring to the European Union, to the national governments, to the industry, and also to the consumers. I think that only then can we create a process which is going to be sustainable and where this transition then is going to be done properly. There's another interesting question. We all seem to be anticipating that this is going to go on for a long while. But what if it doesn't? My question to you is the following. We are now talking about extending the LNG terminal, and that from this point of view, it seems very logical, and it seems that this project simply makes sense in terms of finance, strategy, and everything else. But to what extent does the feasibility of something like that depend on the price of gas? Let's imagine a scenario, a worst-case scenario, that in the end of this year or beginning of next year, we enter a severe recession, then we see a decrease in the consumption of gas, prices of energy reduce. How does this affect in the short run on the feasibility of a project of this type? Well, I think that such an infrastructural project cannot be observed over a short period of time, and its final benefits cannot be observed in a short period of time. With our final capacity of 2.9, this is a capacity that meets or satisfies the market of the Republic of Croatia and maybe partially our neighboring countries. But we are not game changers with this type of capacity. If we opt for the extension of the capacities for the gas pipeline and the terminal itself, this will provide for some long-term security of supply and stability of supply regardless of the current gas price. Because currently the price of gas is not even so much of a topic. Now it's more about the stability and security of supply. The gas price, and I would agree here with Madam Sabina, is that sometimes overinflated or unrealistic, and some 10 days ago it was about 140 euros. But the question is how far this price can go. And at the end of the day, regardless of the fact that our users optimize their procurement portfolio based on their own policies and decisions, with this gas price, there's a major cost of financing of a carrier which needs to be contracted, brought franco to Omišalj to supply this gas to our consumers. But this is the situation that we can see nowadays. And I believe that if those capacities are achieved, this is not going to be a negative thing for the long-term strategy, both of Croatia and of the neighboring countries. Madam Škrtić, how does this work? They say, on the other hand, that the only way that is going to accelerate us in the implementation of renewable energy sources is the high price of fossil fuels, because this makes these projects cost-effective. But now, perhaps you could say something about it. On one hand, you have business in the fossil part, but also, on the other hand, you have a lot of activities investing into renewables. So, is this really now a no-brainer? If you have a project ready for implementation, you should do it now because the returns are very low. Well, as far as the returns on investment into renewables is concerned, as a rule, they range from 2.5 to 4 years, of course, depending on at what moment you're calculating this return. But this should definitely be calculated with the price of equipment, which again started to rise, thereby reducing the profits. We're always in this game. And the question to be asked is whether you have decided strategically to go in that direction and why you have decided to go into renewables or any other project. Energia Naturalis, 6 years ago, drafted the strategy to diversify its operations, and over the last 3 years we have intensified certain activities, thereby opting for green energy and investing intensively into the development of projects for the production of energy from renewables, waste to energy, and several other alternative forms. And we are also intensively deliberating hydrogen. But the real question and the real issue is the following. Today we have heard that there is available funding which can be also used to invest into adequate energy projects. However, allow me to briefly privatize this stage and tell you a story of what it looks like in terms of a project in Croatia.
For one project of, let's say, 40 megawatts, from idea to permitting process, to be able to achieve that phase, to come to that phase, you need about 1,100 days. Of these 1,100 days, about 100 days are the days you need to write out, to do the surveys, to prepare the documentation. And then, in accordance with statutory regulations, you need another 120 days for the statutory procedure. So 220 days in total. And what about the rest of the days, the remaining days of the answer to your question? Yes, in any case, Mr. von Breska referred to this, and we see that we are rather efficient when the reforms are identified in the recovery plans. And that's why we received this first disbursement. And if the new funds will be defined, and he did refer to this as one of the reforms, I think that we could see some positive movements here. We are coming close to the end of our panel, but I have to ask you for your expectations in the fall, in the winter. Everybody is afraid of winter, not only us, our region, and these two countries, but the entire Europe. Mr. Bayek, you're probably doing some forecasting. So is this new normal with these prices, or it will be even higher than that? I think that we should say that this is also an opportunity. I think that the logistic routes are changing, which means that the Mediterranean is becoming more attractive for energy. We could put it that way, which means supply of derivatives on the one hand. Definitely this is an opportunity, especially for Croatia, because of natural resources, because of solar and wind energy. We also see an opportunity here, and we will do everything possible to implement our project. We have 22 megawatts of solar park in plan. We are going to do this full speed. So this is the implementation of energy transition strategy. We look at it positively. And REPowerEU somehow suggests that the country should do it even faster. And I'm not saying that there are going to be a lot of opportunities, but there will be opportunities more for energy companies than for speculative companies. Well, the winter and the fall are going to be difficult, especially because of gas. I think that in terms of all derivatives, there will be logistic challenges and challenges regarding supply, but we don't see some more serious disruptions. We will be paying higher price, but in terms of gas, if you have a look at Germany, Austria, and they have more specific communications with industry, with the public. We can compare it with the story of Indians who are preparing wood for a difficult winter. So I think it's going to be difficult. Last year, I was in Gazprom, And one of the directors started the meeting saying the year is going to be difficult, but we didn't know what he was alluding to. So in terms of forecasting, I'm not going to dwell too long on this, but the point is that you have a series of relatively statistically poor information. So in order to change the trend, we need to have positive information that something is turning in another direction. For the time being, if you have a look at it, we are going to go to the coast. The season is great. There are more and more people traveling by car. It seems that all the Germans will come by car to the Croatian coast, which is good in terms of spending. But I think the autumn will be challenging. Mr. Markotic, from what we've heard from Mr. Bajok, it's not so bad. You have a refinery that's operational on the coast of the Adriatic Sea, Mediterranean, and not somewhere on the continent. It doesn't depend on one pipe. So is it by itself a guarantee that there will be fuel? Well, yes. First, I would like to say that our refinery, Rijeka refinery, is using its full capacity from the end of March this year, and our current focus is not on the future business plan, because it's not going to be easy to discuss this, because it's not really, I mean, you can't put on paper some fixed variable at times like this. But I think that currently our activities are focused on, in addition to Rijeka refinery and our logistic capacities, also to try and sustain this tourist season without a lack of derivatives for end customers. We know that our infrastructure is important not only for the Croatian market, but also for our grades in Bosnia and Herzegovina and Montenegro. So this is a very demanding story that has its end possibilities, especially logistics-wise. But I do believe that we've undertaken all the measures to be successful in this. Mr. Kirchen, LNG, Croatia manages infrastructure but does not do trading. But in the market, you do have some connection with this. Is it possible that this winter we will see a war for LNG because the capacities are limited and the supplies will be limited? Everybody will try to get hold of it. Well, honestly, I don't believe in such a scenario because for the time being, we received such supplies from all parts of the world. LNG is in sufficient volumes in the market, and we see the schedule of carriers for the next gas year, and I don't think there will be any disruptions or reductions in supplies. So we also have a plan for long-term agreements for next gas year, and we will also have some reserves for the spot market and short-term agreements. But I do believe that all cargo will be supplied in that period. Madam Škrtić, this famous word reduction, we haven't heard of this word for a long time. Is it realistic? Can we expect reductions? Well, to answer this question, I could actually, it would mean that I have a crystal ball in front of me. But definitely, the uncertainty is huge. It's very difficult to say whether there will be any reductions, but I think we are faced with challenging months. And we all have to address energy efficiency, and also we need to treat energy prudently. And at the global level, we all hope that very soon some peaceful solution will be found, and all the parties will be sitting at the same table, which will mean a lot to Ukraine, but also to Europe and all of us who share the destiny of the European market. Thank you all for your participation and for this discussion. I hope that we were very interesting. Of course, we cannot predict what is impossible to unpredict, even with a crystal ball. I think that we finished promptly, so we need to be rational, not only with energy, but also with time, as we've just shown with this panel. So thank you once again, but the next panel will more probably reflect on long-term aspects and long-term perspectives and investments to avoid this type of situation that we are faced with right now. Thank you. We would like to thank distinguished panelists for this interesting panel, which brought us to the end of the first part of our conference. We will have another session after a short 10-minute coffee break. See you back in 10 minutes when we'll reconvene. Dobrodošli natrag. Welcome back to the second session and panel discussion, Invest EU. Our panelists are Ivo Milatić, State Secretary at the Ministry of the Economy and Sustainable Development, Aleksandrina Bojanova, Chief Advisor in the EIB Environment Department. She will join us over Zoom. Ante Babic, Advisor from the Energy Directorate of the European Commission. Blaž Košarov, General Director, Gen Energy. Maja Pokrovac, Director of Renewable Energy Sources of Croatia. Our moderator will be the same, Marko Biocin, Assistant Editor-in-Chief for the Economy at Jutarnji List. The floor is yours. Welcome once again, everyone. In the first panel, as I said, we discussed what will happen, in my opinion, in a few months' time or half a year. And I think in this panel, we should discuss what will be happening or what we should do today to enable stable development over a longer period. It seems to me that REPowerEU, although it was adopted as an urgency plan for the current situation, also includes this aura of long-term change in the energy paradigm, but accelerated in comparison to what we had before. Mr. Babic, the first question I have to ask you, because very often we hear in the sector, whether REPowerEU is actually a list of optimistic wishes and plans, which in fact, at least to the extent to which they should be implemented, would hardly be implemented within such a short time. Good afternoon, everyone. I wouldn't say that this is a list of wishes, nice wishes. I would say that this is a light slap in the face to raise our awareness. Why? Well, for a very simple reason. Europe has no oil, has no gas, at least in sufficient volumes for itself. It has no coal, just lignite. So this has never been a strategy Europe was to rely on in terms of its energy policy. We do have nuclear power plants and technology of renewables, which was partially incentivized and pushed further. But nowadays, all these incentives, I mean, even without these incentives, all solar and wind power plants and all other renewable technologies are bankable, and they could compare. We are always asking a question. Well, the renewables are co-finance, there were subsidies in this regard, but we should never forget that many countries finance and co-finance fossil fuels even today. And some of the measures, like freezing of prices, is again an impetus for consumption. I think that this was something we needed to turn to a long time ago. And we pushed our governments and also the European Commission. We tried 2020, 2030 programs. I mean, we pushed those programs because we want to be energy or climate neutral by 2050. And in order to achieve all this, we determined and we've developed a certain plan, but we barely comply with 2020 criteria, 20% of renewables, 20% of energy efficiency. And this is where we have just started. And the things happen like the pandemic, return of pandemic, increased consumption, and this unfortunate Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So In my opinion, as a response to your question, this is not unrealistic. This is only possible because the alternative is you'll be able to see, because I am in Croatia and I was able to see black and white world show. So it seems as if this is an alternative, like playing odd and even game. So we have to be realistic. You did say that this is the only possible, and that practically this enhanced ambition is the only response to the current situation. Mr. Miletić, we know that Croatia has a rather recent energy strategy adopted recently, but there is also a proposal not yet adopted to enhance the targets. So the first basic question would be, should we revise this strategy of ours? And are there any determinants in this strategy that are no longer valid? And are we already complying with something that will be a new strategy to be adopted? But we now have to implement it because we have to, because of circumstances. In terms of our strategy, recently adopted strategy, this strategy is fully in line with what we are discussing today. Everything that could happen to this strategy is that in reality, the figures would be higher than envisaged under the strategy. So the Energy and Climate Plan already foresees what is happening in terms of targets, which are revised triannually. We've also adopted a low-carbon strategy and other strategies, and we have no reason to revisit our route because our route and our path is clear. We want to use renewables in terms of electricity, in terms of achieving energy efficiency, because we have a lot to do in this regard. Also, in terms of hydrogen and carbohydrogen, we have certain plans, and we see them coming true. And it is also important that we included this in our strategy. Perhaps at the time, I remember at the Parliament, there was a discussion that we will be renewable, we will plan further research and exploration. It was 2020, not 100 years ago. But the discussion was that at the moment, the government should terminate all the agreements, concession agreement regarding carbohydrates. And now I would like to see what those MPs who were in those favor of something like that, what they would say today. So definitely Green Plan and Green Deal is something that we've adopted as a topic that we should address. And this is our direction. And REPowerEU just leans onto it and raises awareness of the entire situation, as we heard from Mr. Babic. At the Ministry of Economy, we are aware that dependence of European Union on some markets or some other markets and dependence on some energy sources from other parts of the world and not European Union, this is something that we all as Europeans and also as citizens of Croatia should strive for, because nobody could be so independent to be fully independent, but the percentages should be in favor of independence and not dependence. And that's why I don't think we have any problem with the strategy. The strategy is taking its course, and our activities will show that this course is a right course. Okay, we've determined our course, and now we also have to see how we are going to tread on it. But we've heard initially Mr. Košarok, your counterpart from Croatia, Mr. Barbaric. He was telling us about HEM and its operations. But what about Gen Energy? The situation in which we are right now, did it make you revise your strategy or consideration of the future in your investment plans? Well, everybody was forced to do this. So we now have to start taking action. Even last year, if you remember, in September and October, we were exposed to high electricity prices. And this is not an effect of the war in Ukraine, because hydro energy was power. There was no wind in Germany. Everybody was using gas, and the price went up. And for the first time then, in September and October, if you remember, the European Commission took a decision. We were all discussing VAT, excise prices, etc. And even then, we offered 3+1 vision in order to help our government and neighbors with nuclear power, with the development and construction of a new block, and also hydro energy, because we wanted to finalize the Sava River hydropower plant. Of course, solar energy. We started building a small 6-megawatt solar power plant nearby Brežice hydropower plant, and one gas as a previous energy product that would contribute to decarbonization. That's what we offer. But my opinion is that we should start taking action as soon as possible. Before, we were discussing how long something takes for 20 megawatts. We heard it from our counterpart in the previous panel. But imagine that you are building a nuclear power plant of 1,100 megawatts, how long that would take. So we need to speed up, and we need to amend our legislation so that our energy projects would be accelerated. And the REPower also refers to this. Well, regarding the new block, we will come back to this because we are interested in this, I mean, from either side of the border. Madam Pokrovec, you represent here the biggest Croatian investors in renewables. And for the start, what we heard from State Secretary, our future lies in renewables. And I suppose this is music to your ears. But Mr. Koshuk says that they are building a small power plant, 6 megawatts, which is a huge change in comparison to what we were discussing in terms of volume in solar power plants. So on the one hand, is this what you see? There is no doubt that you are taking the right path. On the other hand, this sector, is it ready to respond to all the challenges that REPowerEU and the new paradigm and new strategy places in front of it?
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you for inviting me to this panel, because this is my first opportunity to be present at the conference by Jutarnji List and discussing this topic. What Ms. Hanžeković said at the beginning, to do as fast and as much as possible, you've also mentioned as fast and as much. REPower also says as many and as fast as possible with renewable. This analogy with the slap in the face, I think that Croatia could get a few more slaps, and we are already, when it comes to renewables, self-punishing ourselves, because we represent 80% of all those, not just Croatian companies, but others. We are talking about all of the companies that have good practices from other countries and all of those who have been working in it for 15 years. This is not the future for us. This is really the dire necessity. And now, when you look at the European Commission, it's already doing caricatures. It has drawn a huge elephant sitting at a desk, and up above it, it says renewable permits. So on the level of all EU member states, when it comes to renewable permits, when it comes to regulative and administrative burden for this sector, that the European Commission should be as fast and as big as possible. The European Commission has said for the first time that renewables are, for the first time, overriding public interest. For the first time, renewable energy sources are a matter of national security. So we are aware, and I believe everyone sitting here who are in this sector know that Croatia is third among all member states when it comes to the burden, administrative burden and other aspects, just as Madam from the previous panel says, about 1,100 days for developing a project. We are the only association in Croatia which is a member also of WindEurope. Europe, of Solar Europe, of Biogas Association, and we have just told ourselves last week that we are absolutely not going to wait for anyone. This resimplified document that is circulating, and any country can see what the obstacles are, we decided a few days ago to do a resimplify for Croatia. So we are going to give ourselves 2 to 3 months, completely scan all of the obstacles in Croatia which are preventing energy transition. What are the deadlines and what are the solutions? So if the European Commission now wants to bring us in 2 years to building wind power in 1 year, and our average is 9 years, if they want to reduce solars to half a year and our average is 4 years, we don't even need to discuss anymore what is the present, what is the future. It's a necessity. If you want to compare Croatia to, for instance, the neighboring Hungary, it has no wind energy, it has solar energy, 25 times more solar. If we only had this many solars in Croatia, nowadays we will be exporting energy. We are not going to compare ourselves to Germany, which has 650 times more installed sources of renewable energy. But let's look at what Croatia can do. It can do absolutely everything. It's crazy now to talk about potentials in energy in Croatia, because in these conferences we need to talk about what specifically we are doing. How are we resolving regulatory obstacles, and what are the business, economic, and citizens models? Last year, government adopted 2 new pieces of legislation which are completely proactive, modern, and how everyone else is following what these acts have brought about. In the last 10 years, we have not had such proactivity, but the sector does not even recognize this and doesn't follow what's happening. So let's really look at ourselves in the mirror, and then we'll be able to respond to these questions. So we each need to do what we are doing in terms of this fast energy transition. And just one more thing. Many people who work at ministries complain of insufficient capacities, human staff capacities. If Croatia could, in general, have people who are working on EU topics, who are better employable, better paid. Let's do this in the state administration. Those who are directly involved to do this energy transition as soon as possible. They need to be motivated and they need to be selected for working in such jobs. Mr. Miletić, I have to follow up on you after this, because this is a general impression that is actually gained. This famous word of cost effectiveness is not even a question now, and the sources of financing are no longer an issue. What remains is this slightly invisible group of obstacles which result in this taking too much time. And it seems to me that these are the main tasks for us in the coming period. How to achieve this proactivity and capitalize on it. How to focus it to really reduce those time frames in obtaining the objectives set up before us by the European Commission. Yes, I absolutely agree here with Maya and everyone else who is aware that it's no longer a matter of commitment, and it's no longer a question of whether something can be done, but it's a question of how fast it can be done. We are now coming across a situation which is called "not in my term of office," and then you have several entities and actors who are important when it comes to energy. So it's not just about the ministry. The ministry really has done, in my opinion, and in the opinion of many, it has adopted some good pieces of legislation. We are not doing the secondary legislation. What is important here is the Croatian Energy Regulatory Agency. It needs to make decisions also, and not just to redraw each decision in the sense of the last article or line of a decision issued by the government or the parliament, because the Croatian Energy Regulatory Agency is an independent sovereign agency which needs to react on the condition in the market, follow everything and do what is appropriate. We now have a methodology which is being adopted which will determine our direction, and this is just one aspect. There's also the Croatian transmission system operator and the distribution system operator. Those companies are of utmost importance. They shouldn't just be shrugging their shoulders. They should be proactive. They are of utmost importance, and they should understand that this is not the 20th century, and some seem to be even stuck in the 19th century. They need to be aware that we are well into the 21st century, and that we need to be very, very proactive. Those famous lists of projects that were being created, I think finally everyone nowadays realizes that there is no project list when it comes to connecting to the grid. There's just live and dead projects. Because REPowerEU does not ask us to provide dead men or dead projects we keep on the list and to see whether they are going to live or die. We are talking about many such projects, and I think most of the people here are aware of it. As for colleagues in the environmental protection, nature protection, and so on, we need to help them as well, because they are also understaffed, because they too have certain procedures. Because this is your ministry? Yes, of course. We are not running away from our responsibility as the ministry. The minister and all of us are very well aware of this, and we are aware that within this process we need to find the best solutions. It's not about degrading the environment to accelerate something. No, God forbid. This is not even an issue. The issue is to comply with everything that we need to comply with, but to make this happen faster. And this is what I have to reiterate. Colleague Duplic is mapping Croatia in terms of wind and everything else. That's the way to do it. This is something we have to do urgently, and that's what needs to be done to be able to do more easily spatial plans, subsequent studies, and so on, to see where we can do something or not. If we know that a certain area is Natura area, then we know we're not going to do anything there. But we have to recognize where we can do things. So we need to completely shift the paradigm for everyone, not just us who are so-called frontmen in terms of adopting policies and legislation, but everyone else also who is involved in this. I think this process is slowly becoming mature, and I think that all of these initiatives, for instance, Resimplify, are excellent initiatives. I was happy to hear about having such an initiative as well, and I can't wait for this to be translated into some serious directives and regulations so that all of us are forced to do so, because it's not normal for somebody to wait to get some sort of a decision for 7 or 8 months, and if somebody has a differing opinion, the ministry is going to say, no, we agree with this, but we don't agree with that, and this all takes too long, so we have to simplify it. Okay, so we need a general mobilization on all levels. Yes, mobilization of everyone. And, of course, as the colleague Maya said, you also have to pay people appropriately. I absolutely agree with it. And this is a message being sent on the whole EU level, because you cannot have people resolving things in the ministry by killing themselves working, where the whole investments in Croatia are on hold because people are not paid enough or because they're understaffed. So we really have to avoid this from happening. One of our ideas is that this needs to be done. Trade unions are going to be happy about this last message, but after hearing something about the regulatory environment and from investors, let's hear also something from somebody who should be financing those investments partly. We have Madam Alexandrina Bojanovna with us. My question for you is the following. It's a question actually I asked all of the other panelists as well, and this is whether this now affects your strategy of financing projects as well. And do you also revise now whatever you have been doing previously and what you tackled previously? Do you now see things differently? And what kind of projects should be financed, in what way, and with what amounts?
Thank you very much. Can you hear me well?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers for hosting this important event. REPowerEU is indeed an important initiative which will help us fast forward the clean transition, and we need to join forces to achieve a more resilient energy system and really a true energy union. Against this backdrop, your question how the energy crisis affects the long-term strategy of the EIB, the EU Bank and the EU Climate Bank is indeed very pertinent. And just to introduce, I would like to give a few numbers of the type of support that we have been providing to the energy sector. Between 2016 and 2020, we have financed energy infrastructure projects totaling some 60 billion euros, of which 53 were for renewable energy, energy efficiency, and electricity grid projects. And in 2021 alone, we spent more than 15 billion euros in loans for the support of, energy efficiency, renewable energy, and grids. Furthermore, as the EU Climate Bank, we have made significant commitments towards financing climate and the environment. We have made a first very important decision back in 2019 with the adoption of our new energy lending policy to phase out investments in unabated fossil fuels. And we have also committed to be entirely Paris aligned in all our activities starting 2021. And this is already a fact today. In the context of the current energy crisis, our long-term strategy will continue to be based and guided by two key documents, which I just mentioned, namely the energy lending policy, which, while adopted in 2019, will be scheduled for review towards the end of 2022 and 2023. And we will, of course, look at what we did in the past in terms of project financing and take the lessons learned. The four building blocks of the energy lending policy of the European Investment Bank resemble quite a lot the main pillars of the REPowerEU initiative, mainly first and foremost unlocking the energy efficiency potential. As it was mentioned in the previous panels as well, this is a very viable short-term solution and relatively cheap, so there is a lot to be done in terms of energy efficiency. Second of all, to decarbonize the energy supply, and this is indeed the long-term objective, increasing the share of renewables. Third of all, to support innovative low-carbon technology. I read somewhere that more than 50% of the emission reductions by 2050 will come from new technologies. Therefore, it's very important that we invest the necessary resources in new technologies. These are usually high-risk projects, and in this context, having the support of the InvestEU is extremely important because it enhances the support that European Investment Bank can provide for such innovative technologies. And finally, of course, investing in a more secure energy infrastructure. So that's about the energy lending policies. And again, we have been applying this policy since 2019. Now we have another key document, which is the Climate Bank roadmap, with which we made, again, three commitments. First of all, to only finance projects which are Paris aligned. So we cannot support any more projects which are not aligned with a 1.5 degree scenario. We not only look in the context of the Climate Bank roadmap, we not only look at projects, but we also look at counterparts, at the wider activities of our counterparts. We have adopted the so-called PATH policy, where we would require from all high-emitting counterparts to develop long-term decarbonization plan. You mentioned in the beginning of the panel that it is important to look at the long-term solutions. That is correct. So our high emitters, our European and also outside EU high emitters, will need to develop credible decarbonization plans with specific targets, with both medium term as well as long term, because it's important indeed that we take action during the critical decade, while of course addressing all the social aspects. So that's about the Paris alignment of our operations as well as our counterparts. Then we have committed to increase our green lending to 50%, and we will also support up to 1 trillion of green investments by 2030. So these are the three pillars of the climate bank roadmap. Again, while we have the solid grounds, we will of course continue working closely with the European Commission and with the EU member states, Croatia including, to how we can accelerate our lending, but not only. I heard the esteemed panelists mention the need for technical assistance, and indeed the example that was given in the previous panel about the length of preparation of the projects, we need to do something about it. What we as the EIB can do in terms of project acceleration is first and foremost to increase the share of our financing. So for Croatia and for energy efficiency projects more generally, we can finance up to 75% of project cost. And we can also provide free of charge technical assistance to help with the project preparation, to reduce the 100 days that were cited in the previous panel, and also through our participation to count in other investors, so shorten the overall timeline of the financing of these projects. In terms of cooperation with Croatia, we have signed at the beginning of last year, I believe, a memorandum of understanding with the Ministry of Economy, and this is a very good basis for us to continue going forward. We provided also in 2022 a loan to HEP also for renewable energy, and we very much look forward to continuing that cooperation with the public as well as the private sector in Croatia. Thank you.
Hvala vam na ovome.
Thank you for this. You have given me an introduction into my next questions. You've mentioned long-term renewable investments which are aligned with the Paris Agreement and all of the other conventions. And now, Mr. Babic, you have said that this is the only path we have. There's no alternative. But it seems to me that there may be some different routes on this path. And we've seen this discussion mostly when we heard a discussion on the EU level about the new taxonomy and about how investments into natural gas and nuclear energy are going to be treated. And now, again, we have seen this new aspect with the crisis in supply and the questions of security of supply. How do you see the future of those two energy products in this future energy strategy of ours? Well, something that has always been known is that gas was never intended to be the future of Europe. It was always just a temporary, transitional energy product. But what has now made us raise this to another level is our dependence primarily on the Russian gas. So this part is also involved into REPowerEU, and of course it intensified the thinking that the gas should be in the taxonomy as a transitional fuel if you are transitioning for something even worse, like coal, to gas and something else. Is this really so? This is an interesting question because many experts think that even this is excessive, that because of this question of security of supply, gas has lost even this transitional role, so that perhaps it's better just for security reasons to keep using coal for a while and then go directly from coal to renewables and then skip gas. Well, I think that in that case, what we are counting on is that a lot of asset and infrastructure would remain captured because the gas infrastructure is expected to partly be replaced with hydrogen, but it's some 20 or so years. So this is a long-term story. Whereas if you look at also the price of energy, of electricity, it is determined by the marginal energy product, which has been the gas lately. Just as, again, in this discussion on the pricing of energy, and the marginal models say that in 2020, when we had a lot more renewable energy sources, in some days we had even negative electricity prices because the marginal energy product was a wind power plant or renewable energy sources.
So the model is as it is. Gas is here. Gas is powerful, especially in certain sectors. You cannot imagine what will happen after REPower, because we are making plans regarding security of supply or security and development to avoid gas reduction from Russia affecting long-term development. Some industries, including petrochemical industry, glass industry, they use gas a lot. And it will be very difficult to substitute their processes being fueled by something else. However, heating, household heating, is much easier substituted by heat pumps. So there is an alternative. But I think we've jumped immediately to gas. However, what we also see, on the other hand, is nuclear energy. And nuclear energy is facing some sort of revival. And we are glad about it because it represents 15% of the entire energy mix of the European Union. Naturally, we shouldn't keep out of our mind that there was a set of circumstances that, in addition to everything that was going on, as we heard from Mr. Košarok, that before Ukraine, there were changes in supply chains, also an increase in prices, and the same happened with overhauls in French nuclear power plants. And a portion of nuclear power plants in Eastern Europe also depend on nuclear fuel technologies from Russia. So it is all interconnected. Nuclear energy was never disputable in terms of not producing CO2. It is completely CO2-free. But the question is asked regarding decommissioning. But we are only speaking of fission technologies. The new technological solutions would also result in much easier handling of waste. And that's why I look forward to, not I, but Brussels looks forward to new plans for the second block of Krško between Croatia and Slovenia. And such projects are supported by REPower, because it includes regional aspects and regional considerations. When you put together Croatia and Slovenia and some other candidate countries like Bosnia, then we can say that we have a lot of renewables, including hydro and nuclear energy. So now is the right time. Mr. Košarok, the project that you refer to, I think there is a huge interest of Croatian public, not only in the energy sector, but also wider. If you could explain it to us, or just explain or describe it to us, but what is your plan? I know that this is far away, but everything that you could tell us about this project for the time being. Well, first of all, taxonomy that you mentioned today. There will be voting regarding taxonomy at the European Parliament. Some groups are against gas and nuclear being included in taxonomy. So I think at high noon they are about to vote. So we'll all be against. Taxonomy for gas and nuclear should remain inside. So I think that we've already resolved this, but we'll see the outcome of voting. Regarding the second block, together, Croatia and Slovenia have been together for 40+ years, and I think that this was a very good project. Now we are referring to this first block. And now we will extend our longevity for another 20 years or more. So we try to do everything regarding the environment. We will see what will happen, but I'm certain that we will extend this life cycle for another 20 years. The second block, we should actually be already discussing the third block, but we have energy permit for 1,100 megawatts, so 9 terawatt hours will be available for electricity. We are counting on, you know, that Slovenia adopted a decision that Šosta would be phased out in 2033. So Slovenia will have a shortage of 4 terawatt hours, which could be supplemented by the second block. So if everything turns out right, 2033, 34, the second block would already be placed in operation, producing low-carbon energy. But now I would like to play the devil's advocate or counterparty and just barrage you with questions. So all nuclear power plants, newer nuclear power plants, apart from those that use Russian technology, if we look at the budget and time delays, do you see the opportunity that a nuclear power plant, when it starts to be constructed and placed in operation, that green energy would be so developed that the power plant will lose its position? No. Nuclear energy will always have its position. Such a huge block will always have its position if we speak of renewables. Because today we have sun in Europe. We have surplus of sun. And when there is no sun and wind, what we need passive energy. We need complementary renewables, but also we need other sort of energy, which is nuclear energy. Probably you are referring to Hinkley Point in England. Well, they did not have so many difficulties with technology, but with financing costs. And that's why we will now take a step back in the company and we will try to develop a very good financial construction. Because you have to know 2/3 of the entire investment is allocated for financing costs. Everybody knows everything about new generations of nuclear power plants, and we also need new reactors. Maybe in 20, 30 years' time, we'll have a different discussion. But if you can follow up what we just heard, this is another criticism that says that we have wind, we have solar energy, and we know that they are in front, but there is no space of nuclear energy. We'll have to recycle, but then there is no economic reasoning. Well, nuclear energy could work. All the new nuclear power plants could work according to new technology. In former Yugoslavia, for the 1st of May, when the factories were closed, then there was a drop. And now there could be another drop by 20% with all the new technologies and investments. But if needed, it could also operate not only like this, but the market needs this passive energy, and we are paying for this, both Croatia and us. Is there a vision, another vision for this partnership, whether it would be similar to the first block? Well, in the last 40 years, it was like a marriage. There are ups and downs. But in the last 10 years, I think we had only ups. So this is a model. Well, of course, we are always, Ivo, you and I are always having the highs or the ups. But I think that this is a model that should be reconsidered. I can only comment the former State Secretary and our collaboration. And I am also happy that the former State Secretary is now Minister of Energy in Slovenia. So I have no doubt about our collaboration when we speak of Intergovernmental Commission for Nuclear Power Plant Krško. In the last 5-6 years, we did a lot. Third revision, coordination, authorities and bodies. So I think this is functioning well, and we need to proceed. And the situation in which we have actually a power plant, which is ours, but it is in the neighborhood and should be used. And our friends from Slovenia have a nuclear power plant, which, with the support of Croatia, is in another position than if they were to build it by themselves. So I think that we should have this project. I agree with what Mr. Košaruk has said. And the problems with financing could be problems, but to have a stable source of energy and such terawatt hours disposable from the future power plant, this is something we need. If you see that Croatia consumes in total, I think, 110 terawatt hours of energy overall, 18.5 terawatts of electricity. And then we all here are aware that in the next 10-15 years, heating and cooling and transport and everything that use some other types of fuels will slowly switch to this type of energy. We need not discuss whether we need nuclear energy. We do need nuclear energy, and we need to consider it because it is an energy without CO2 imprint. And this is something that we have to work on. And in terms of total price of our story, Croatia now has to use our situation. We had discussion about gas, but gas will be needed for years. And our gas pipelines are in good condition. They are newer. They will be expanded. We discussed this morning. My colleague Erhen was here. And we all know that this project, doubling of LNG terminal capacity and another capacity towards Hungary, Slovenia, and Austria. This is something that can be done in the next 3 years. It just depends on capex from grant. And this is very transparent. To have as much capex from grant to anticipate future shocks of such investment. In classical open season today, nobody would apply, or actually we won't have so many companies not to be able to finance this. So we do need gas pipelines, so we do need energy. We need to adapt gas pipelines for hydrogen. We want to use green hydrogen. So this huge amount of power plants that we'll have in Croatia in the next 5-6 years, they have to produce green hydrogen, which should be stored in such pipelines. So this is the future. This is our future. Without renewables, especially electricity generated in different ways, we won't be able to meet the shocks that we have right now. If we were to depend only on our neighbors today, our neighbors would not be looking at us with aspiration because of LNG terminals. So our neighbors prevented us from having IAP, which would be very good today. 6 billion cubic meters maximum capacity from Albania would now be very good for entire Europe. REPowerEU is to bring us a lot in terms of IAP, which means that SEFAM would be reopened and there will be funds also for IAP, because IAP reconnects 3 NATO countries. And I hope also 3 EU countries. So physically it connects Albania, Montenegro, and Croatia. And tomorrow, of course, Bosnia and Herzegovina will depend on this. Physically, it will not go by, but this interconnection is important. app is important for us in REPowerEU also because of transport, because of Adriatic and Ionian corridor that opens up other positions. And all such situations are heading in the direction that Croatia needs to have strategic investments, irrespective of whether they are energy-related or transport-related or some other type of investments. But it is important also to mention here, to discuss whether we will simplify the procedures, whether this is needed. I think that now the biggest problem is how to simplify procedures and make up for time. There are so many good projects. There are so many good engineers in ODS and HOPS who can develop a grid and spend this 4 billion. And if needed, also activate financial instruments, because today we did not refer to more than 3 billion financial instruments. So this would be the sweetest task of Croatian government, to leverage such financial instruments if we were to have more projects than we have grants. So those are the loans, yes, favorable loans, which could also be used as grants if certain targets that are important for energy transition and for Green Deal and for everything else are achieved. So this is, I just had the need to say this out loud so that you can get the picture. Well, it is okay because we will soon wrap up, but I think it's also important to mention this. Madam Pokrovac, I won't ask you about nuclear energy, but I will ask you about this discussion regarding renewables and their optimum volume, so to speak. We know that currently we've heard this famous solar rooftops. On the other hand, we know that we have a pipeline of huge projects. But what do we need? What would be the optimum model? Do we need solar rooftops or solar fields or both? What do we actually need? Thank you for this question. Very often we discuss this in Croatia, whether big projects or small projects are important. You're looking at your country, you're looking at potentials, and we are trying to use the potential to tap into this potential of ours. In terms of solar rooftops, we all know that repowers are 25% to be produced or generated electricity or power from solar rooftops, and there are clearly identified years. No longer you will be able to build a public building without a solar rooftop. So this is a ready-made story. There are clear instructions regarding percentage of generation on rooftops. If we speak of major projects, we have had them for years. And now we have 2 billion euro investment within our company, 2 megawatts of development. We are not referring to 2040, 2050 anymore, because we don't have to, we could have a vision, and we want to be responsible. And we want to be somebody who will participate in the fulfillment of strategic energy targets in Croatia by 2030, 5,000 megawatts from renewables. Well, one of the ways for this would be biodiversity for the first time is equal to renewables. We kept referring to hops with criticism, but I will give you a good example. For instance, we can see all the responsible parties that are drafting studies for connections. This list is public, and they are in charge of this. But the proposal of the Ministry of Economy is also to have the same approach regarding environmental protection. So such authorized parties should be publicized. But environmental protection is such that we don't have such a public list, but we have a ministry who is deciding about this topic. We also have good examples about good practices in Croatia. So I would say that we all know that solar and wind would account for 80% of the overall European energy transition. We know where we stand in terms of solar energy. The solar panels are now installed everywhere, whether it's buildings, facades, rooftops, rivers, lakes, also highways, where noise is there to be reduced and used as energy. And I see also Mr. Tušek, State Secretary. So agro-solar is also a strategic determinant of many European countries. What does it mean? We are aware that there will be first projects in Croatia. Our vineyards in Dalmatia are deteriorating because of the sun. And a European Investment Bank has approved one study together with us and 3 faculties of agriculture in Croatia. We are analyzing where we could install solar panels. France has one of its 3 strategic targets, agro-solars.
It's put on agricultural land because it protects you from increased solar rays, and it also defends you from hail. It is put on lakes because it protects from cormorants, and it reduces the temperature, so you have up to 20% increase per agricultural production there. We don't put it just anywhere, but rather where we can achieve the synergy of energy and agriculture. I would like to mention biogas, and nobody mentions it in space. On energy conferences, we have 50 megawatts of biogas in Croatia, and REPower said by 2030, 10 times biomethane is something you need to have in your countries. We've been working for a whole year with all biogas installations in Croatia to raise them to 200 to 300 megawatts. And here we cooperate with the Directorate for Energy. So the response is in the stability of nuclear power plants, yes, but we can no longer think in the old ways. Renewable energy sources are the most innovative space in energy. In Spain, if you go there, wind balances wind. Basic energy is biogas, so in the gas network that we have Croatia, we could also have biogas. The role of biogas in the climate segment and in CO2 is immeasurable. So the old paradigms no longer exist. They exist in Croatia only in our heads. So there's much more propulsiveness in this space. What we often talk about in Croatia is the financial topic. It is very different to distinguish between financing and what nowhere exists in the market. The early stages of developing energy require no incentives or energy. The early development phase is not a financial instrument, and this is what is needed in renewable energy sources if we want to have accelerated energy transition. Premium model, which is a mechanism that Croatia does have, and this is the only guarantee nowadays if you look in the long run, as you've mentioned in the previous panel, which is that there's a lot of uncertainty. During the COVID crisis, we had a twice lower price, and now the price of energy has increased 5-fold. So this insecurity is offered by the premium model. This is the only mechanism that you have nowadays. What is our idea, and hasn't been mentioned so far, is that this premium model can be applied to all projects which are currently being developed in Croatia. That would be security then, and then we don't have to talk about cold or otherwise winters. We know what we do then in Croatia and how we provide for energy transition. Well, thank you. We've come to the very end. Madam Boyanova, I have to ask you in the end to end on an optimistic note. We have talked about projects a great deal. Do you have some examples, perhaps, of project financed by EIB, which could serve as an example for all others as to what should be constructed, how it should be done in this sector of energy? Some projects which are going to help us have clean and secure future.
Thank you very much. And again, just a few statistics. We have an excellent cooperation with Croatia, and since we started our cooperation in 1977, we have financed more than 80 projects, 80, for an amount above 7 billion euros. The second thing I wanted to say is that Croatia, as it was mentioned already by the other panelists, is that Croatia enjoys very favorable conditions in terms of solar and wind. And these are the types of projects that we would very much look forward to developing. Croatia can double its renewable energy capacity by 2030. And again, it is important that we concentrate on these projects. I will give a few examples of projects from Croatia, actually, that we consider exemplary. One I already mentioned in my opening speech, the project with HEP from 2022, and it relates to the construction and operation of a number of renewable energy projects, onshore wind as well as solar in Croatia. Then we have the ZABA energy efficiency framework loan under the energy efficiency private finance for energy efficiency initiative. So it's a framework loan that finances a number of small-scale energy efficiency measures. And then we have the RIMAT also project from some time ago. That's again an excellent example of the types of projects that we would like to finance in terms of green RDI. Going forward, again, the opportunities are huge, and I again wanted to thank you for inviting the European Investment Bank to this panel, and encourage you very much to get in touch with our local representatives. And also you can contact me, of course, if you have any questions. Thank you very much for this very interesting discussion today.
Evo, hvala I vama još jednom na sudjelovanju.
Thank you as well, once again, for your participation. We are at the very end, Mr. Koroshok. You have mentioned our relationship with Krška, but also, generally speaking, in energy sector, we have had ups and downs. But it seems to me, especially when we look at the access of, or exceeding of Europe to the Schengen and EU zone, Croatia is going to be more integrated with the EU than ever before since the breakdown of Yugoslavia. So do you, in that light, see, in terms of the future, not just Krško as well, but you have also mentioned the possibility of jointly regulating waters and so on. But there's this whole paradigm which is pushing us even further in that direction, and we really cannot do with each other. Yes, I don't see anything happening without cooperation. A good example that we have signed with colleague Milotic is the Hydrogen Valley, together with the Fulania and northern Italy, and hydrogen will first appear in transport. We have mentioned transport now today a few times, so the hydrogen is definitely something that will be the first thing where we can connect very well in terms of transport, because all transport routes go through Slovenia, then Croatia, and then further on to the Balkans. The same goes for energy. I am sorry that we have ceded a part of Krk. Many Slovenian companies were in the project for a while, and then 10 years ago they decided to opt out of the project. But now they say it's a very good project, because at the end of the day, energy is a marathon. This is not just REPowerEU, this is not just a toolbox, it's really something for the long run. You see now that we've constructed nuclear power plant Krško 1 in the 1970s. And it's still in operation. There are also things we can do about transmission and distribution. We are just talking about how many new solar panels we're going to put out, but what about the distribution systems? Already in Slovenia we have a problem that we cannot connect as many solar panels as people would like to have connected. So this is also complementary with the policy pursued in the neighboring countries. Thank you very much. Thanks to all of you who have remained until the very end of this panel. I boasted after the first panel for sticking to the timeline, and now we are running a little bit late, but I'm sure no one is sorry to see that happen, because it was a very interesting panel. I hope that next time we meet, we'll see as many of those 6,000 megawatts, as Madam Pokrovec has mentioned, will be realized in both Slovenia and Croatia. Thank you once again. Thank you to the panelists, to the moderator, dear ladies and gentlemen, distinguished invitees, and all dear viewers following us on the portal jutarnji.hr. Thank you for participating in today's conference. by the EIB, representation of the European Commission, and media partners Jutarnji list and Delo. I believe you found it useful, and we are now completing and concluding the official part. We invite all of the participants to have lunch and socialize more informally at the Zinfandel restaurants. Have a pleasant rest of the day.